Hi there! My name is Taylor Costello, and today we'll be discussing all things Parkinson's disease. What is it? How do you get it? And what do you do if you have it? Let's get started. So, what is Parkinson's disease? Well, Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative movement disorder that occurs when neurons in the brain do not produce enough dopamine, which is a chemical that affects motor control. PD is the second most common neurodegenerative disorder after Alzheimer's, and it affects about 3% of Americans over the age of 65. PD is characterized by the degeneration of neurons in the substantia nigra, a part of the brain that controls balance and movement. These neurons make the neurochemical messenger dopamine, which is partially responsible for starting a circuit of messages that coordinate normal movements, which explains the common symptoms presented with the diagnosed patient. There has been extensive research for PD since its founding. However, its causes are still unknown, which is why it can be referred to as idiopathic PD. What are some common symptoms of Parkinson's disease? So, with the loss of movement abilities due to the lack of dopamine production, many symptoms of PD revolve around involuntary movements. The most common symptoms include lack of balance, which can lead to falls and decreased gait quality, uncontrollable trembling body parts at rest, stiffness of the limbs and trunk, which will typically increase during movement, bradykinesia, which is a decreased heart rate, which can lead to gradual slowness of movements, and symptoms usually begin on one side of the body. A person can have any combination of these symptoms, and along with the most common, there are also other secondary symptoms that are expressed concurrently. Some of these symptoms include depression, anxiety, dementia, and many more. As we discussed in the previous slide, gait quality is decreased with patients with Parkinson's disease, making completing daily tasks a lot more difficult. These effects can be expressed before a diagnosis is even made. A study was conducted by Ilaria Miletti to monitor gait quality while performing daily tasks using sensors on the subject's feet to see if they are able to improve medical assessment with Parkinson's disease. This experiment consisted of 4 different gait methods, 2 of which are based on thresholds and the other 2 based on machine learning approach. Subjects included 26 Parkinson's disease patients, both on and off of levodopa conditions, which is a medication we will discuss later on, as well as 11 other healthy subjects used as a control. Every subject had an inertial sensor on their feet during the walking tasks. Results of the experiment showed that the use of sensors to assess abnormal gait patterns can be beneficial during the medical assessment of a potential Parkinson's disease patient. So who is at risk for Parkinson's disease? In most cases, patients are adults over the age of 60 years old. However, there are other occasions where PD is diagnosed at unusually young ages. Early onset PD is considered to be diagnosed between the ages of 21 and 40 years old. There's also juvenile PD, which is diagnosed under the age of 21, and that is extremely rare. Men are 2 times more likely than women to get PD. Genetics, surprisingly, have only been present in the diagnosis of about 15% of Parkinson's disease patients. Medications such as any neuroleptic or dopamine receptor blocking drug can induce the disease as age increases. It has also been shown that head trauma and exposure to toxins can be risk factors as well. So how is Parkinson's disease diagnosed? Catching PD as early as possible is important in creating a maintenance program. It is hard to diagnose due to common signs and symptoms to other disorders that are similar to PD, which makes the disease commonly misdiagnosed. A neurologist will conduct a neurological exam, check the patient's medical history, and compare the symptoms that the patient's experiencing. The neurological exam consists of a series of neuromotor skills, such as coordination and fine movement exercises. An example of can be as simple as walking, since the most noticeable effect of PD appears in the person's gait. The person will most likely have a shuffle walk and even experience freezing episodes where they completely stop moving. This can be extremely dangerous, especially in situations when the person is walking across the street. The Hone and Yar scale is used as a guideline for diagnosing PD, and it tests for mental capacity, behavior, mood, ADLs, and motor skills. SPECT, or a single photon emission computed tomography, is a more advanced technology that is used to diagnose PD at the earlier stages. What this test does is send stained chemicals through the brain that attach to dopamine sites. The amount of dopamine sites can be shown on a photograph and will be significantly reduced in PD patients due to the lack of dopamine-producing neurons. This can be seen as having less color in the brain. Here I have an example of a Parkinson's disease patient's SPECT scan. The red-orange color represents dopamine in the brain. On the left picture, there is a brain of someone with the early stages of PD. Here you can see the decreased red-orange color, here signifying the regression of dopamine production. The middle brain is one of an advanced PD patient, which shows a significantly unorganized and low level of dopamine. The right brain is that of a healthy patient without PD, and we can compare how clear the results are and how the full presence of dopamine in this subject. So how do you treat Parkinson's disease? Unfortunately, there is no cure for patients with PD. However, there are other approaches that aim to help delay and control the motor symptoms. Therapies are used as a way to improve and extend the patient's quality of life. They work on tremor control, balance, and more to stimulate dopamine production in the brain. Beginning therapy at the early stages of PD can help delay the symptoms. The most effective medicine is called levodopa, which I mentioned previously, which is a chemical that's converted to dopamine in the brain. It typically is paired with another medication called carbidopa, which makes sure that levodopa doesn't break down before it gets to the brain. Some side effects of the medications include a short response to each dose, painful cramps, and involuntary movements. For patients with PD, a surgical treatment called deep brain stimulation, or DBS, is available. It is a procedure where the surgeon inserts electrodes to stimulate areas of the brain that are responsible for movement. Okay, so for my case study, I have Jose Cuervo here. He is 63 years old, 5'11" at 193 pounds with a BMI of 26.9. His blood pressure reading is 132/92. Jose does not smoke, and his total cholesterol is 225.4 milligrams per deciliter. Unfortunately, like his grandfather, Jose was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Since his diagnosis 2 years ago, Jose developed symptoms including tremors and stiffness during daily activities. This is frustrating for him because before his diagnosis, he was very physically active and hopes to go back to his active self. Due to his inability to be active, Jose has experienced episodes of depression. It is important for the patient's goals to be reinforced for motivation and tracking improvement. For Jose, staying active is extremely important to him. There are some recommendations from the ACSM for patients with PD and other chronic diseases. Walking is the most recommended method of aerobic exercise because it works on both their gait abnormalities while processing instructional cues. So it's kind of like a neuromotor exercise. It should be done for about 30 minutes a day, 3 days a week at a moderate intensity level. For strength training, it may be safer for Parkinson's disease patients to use machines since they provide back support for balance, just in case there is an occurrence of fatigue or falling. Strength training should be done 2 to 3 times per week at another moderate intensity. It is also recommended to perform static stretches for all muscle groups, holding each stretch for about 20 to 30 seconds. This should be done after a 5-minute warm-up and after a 5-minute cool-down. If exercise testing is needed for the patient, there are a few recommended guidelines to follow. First, the patient should be tested for their current physical health status. It is easiest to do this by having them use a recumbent stationary bicycle while taking their heart rate and blood pressure. This will give them the ability to lean on the back of the seat and relieve any pressure of the low back while not worrying about balance. Strength training should test all major muscle groups and typically consists of 1 rep maximum to 10 rep maximums due to the population's general age group. In some situations, it might be necessary to replace a weight with a household item depending on the person's level of strength. Here is my list of 5 references, and thank you for watching.